Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with a longer video. There's a lot going on here. I bit off more than I could chew, that's for sure. But we'll just start at the beginning. So, I have this stencil. This is the Picket Studios Christmas Ornaments stencil. Really cute. Different ornaments. There's little toppers there. Even the little pieces for the strings. And I don't even know what my thought process this time was like all over the place. So what I wanted to do first, I needed to create a template. I had already die cut just a bunch of pieces of cardstock using some circle wafer dies. And I wanted to use the stencil with them. And along with these Picket paper glitz pastes. I'll get to that in a second. So I made this template because I was like, I had a ton here. I honestly had no idea how many cards I was going to make. I was just winging it, doing one thing at a time. So I've got my template here. I just blended some gray ink over it. I die cut the circles, and I didn't do a very good job centering the die cut circles when I die cut them. So I ended up making it more work for myself, but it still works. So I've got my little template to hold various die cut circles under this stencil so that I can do a bunch of these because I die cut so much. So paper glitz, they sent these to me. These first three that I'm using, I am 99.9% positive this is not how they're supposed to be. I will show the white one, the sparkle one, after all of this. I think the consistency of these is supposed to be very, very thin, like watery, really. But mine, when they showed up, they were frozen solid. It is cold here. It gets very cold. Things freeze, which can definitely affect any brand of paste. Glues, all sorts of things. A lot of times things will thaw out and they're fine. I haven't had a problem, but like some products, it will literally like ruin them or change them. This, I think it kind of changed them. I think it thickened them because they were literally little bricks. So I'd let them thaw out. I stirred them up and I was like, I'm going to use them. I don't care. So this first one is the silver bells, and this works because for me, this consistency was thick enough. However, when I got to the last one and how thin it is, I would not recommend this way of using it unless you use, say, pixie spray on your stencil, something, because a really thin consistency of anything, if you're trying to apply it with a palette knife, it's just going to go everywhere. But I will link to other options and I'll get to that in a second. So I did the silver ones. It was Silver Bells paper glitz. It's really pretty. It's got like glitter in it, and yeah, I think these would probably work better in like if they're all very, very runny, probably maybe applied with like a sponge, I'm thinking, rather than a palette knife. I don't know. This is very new to me. So I would use their, what are they? Paper glaze. And I'll have links to those because I use one in a little bit here. And I really like the consistency of that. It's more like a mousse consistency. So anyway, after the first color of the silver, I washed my stencil. I kept my little template in place. And then I'm using the red, which is True Christmas Red. And this one, again, is the paper glitz. This one was frozen, thicker consistency now. It worked just fine. And I was using my little reverse tweezers to pull out the pieces after I had applied the paste to them. And I just have this big cutting board that I use to put projects on to dry so I can kind of move it around and that sort of a thing. So same thing. After it's done the red, clean the stencil again. I just wash it with a bit of soap and water, dry it off, continue on with my day. So then I'm using the green. Again, this one's been frozen. It's a thicker consistency. It worked. This was Lime Christmas Green. So again, same thing. Put the little die cut circles into my template, applied the paste, repeat. I didn't really count how many I was doing. I was just like, I die cut all these scraps and now I'm going to cover them. Cover them with pretties. So did the greens. After I was done all of those die cut pieces, I wanted to use the white. So I've got this, for whatever reason, this paper glitz. This is the sparkle one, and it's really pretty. It's really pretty. It has like a mica in it. It's really pretty, but it is, I assume this is their true consistency, and it is like liquid. Like I'm trying to show it here on camera. Like it's just liquid. I was trying to scoop it up with my palette knife, and I was like, this is not working. So that's where I think it would probably work better with a sponge. But I was like in my zone, you know, I had already used the palette knife and my brain was not computing. So you can see my big cutting board with all these die cut pieces. Like I just went to town with all of it. So by this point, they're already like dry. The stuff dries quite quickly. I didn't apply it very thick. Obviously if it's in its normal consistency, it would probably like you apply it pretty thin. So I was like, well, I'm just going to try this. I kind of knew what was going to happen, but I had to do it. So I put white die cut circles into my template. My template's a mess by this point because, you know, it's covered in paste, but who cares? And then I tried to apply it with a palette knife, and yeah, no, it went everywhere. I'm not sure if it shows up much on camera, but it just oozed underneath the stencil, and there was no definition. There was nothing. Again, it could somewhat be alleviated if I'd use like pixie spray, something like that, but that wasn't going to work for this. Applying with a sponge, that would probably work amazing, especially this sparkle. It's very pretty. It is very pretty. So this did not work, and I was like, ugh, but I was determined. I wanted white ornaments as well. So I grabbed a container of another new to me product, the paper glaze. This one it's called Arctic Fox. It's the Luxe paper glaze. It has glitter in it. It's beautiful. I'm going to link to these first. I'll have the paper glitz at the end of the supply list at the bottom. I'll keep everything separate. So if you're interested in the paper glitz and want to, play with them, I'll have links to the ones I use. They'll be at the bottom of the supply list. But for something like this, I recommend something more like this paper glaze. And again, it's like a mousse consistency and very easy to spread. Really thin, really light, and it's just pretty. I was really happy with this. So I'll link to similar colors of this, and yeah, you guys can go to town. I'm assuming you can actually use a paper glaze as well with like sponges. I haven't had time. I was busy doing this, making a huge mess and having fun with it. So I used the paper glaze for the white ones, and again, that's what I'll link to in similar colors, because there's a silver, there's a red, there's a green. I know they have like other colors. Works fabulously. So same idea as what I was doing before. Just applied them with my palette knife. Use my little reverse tweezers to pull them out so I'm not messing up the designs. And then after I'm done everything, I just peeled off that template. And I've got like dried glitter paste stuff, on my glass work surface. I highly recommend. I really love, and I've mentioned this in other videos. This is from Tim Holtz. It's the media tool set. It comes with this scraper and a clear ruler meant for the media glass mat. This scraper is one of the best. It's a special polymer. It's super rigid, and I have been using this for years. I don't even know how many, I bought this, of course, as soon as it came out, but it is super rigid. I use it to scrape everything off. I know someone's going to say, well, just use a razor blade. Yeah, no, I ain't going to do that. I am klutzy enough. I would slice myself open with one of those. I can work with sharp objects, but I'm not. I'm not going to do that. So anyway, I like that little scraper, my little Tim Holtz scraper, I call it, and that it works great. And it especially works. I put a baby wipe under it and then scrape that. I can remove everything from my glass mat with that. It's great. So I cleaned up my mess, and then I was dithering with these because the stencil has a adorable little topper on the stencil in different sizes, but I'm like, that's not gonna work because I've die cut everything. So I'm like, they need toppers. They just look like circles otherwise. So I pulled out just a little Studio Katia wafer die set that I actually used in a previous holiday video. It's the ornament shaker dies, and there's just a little rectangle in there, and I die cut just a bunch of scraps of some silver cardstock with that little rectangle die. You could definitely just paper trim, use a paper trimmer and die cut, or trim little strips into rectangles. But I like the beveled edge. It just looks a little more finished in my opinion. So I used the die. That took a bit, but I used my little mini die cut machine. I'm actually going to show it here in a second because I ran out of toppers. Because again, I wasn't counting. I was just going to town. So to die cut this many with just one little wafer die, This is exactly how I do it. I just use a scrap and I put it at the very top edge of my little, well, with this as a folder because I'm using my Gemini Mini, but you know, if I was using any other little die cut machine, I would just put it at the very top and I go roll it through the front, roll it backwards. So it takes like 2 seconds, die cut. And I just repeat that process over and over again while I'm zoned out, watching a show, listening to Christmas music, you know, whatever, you know, these sorts of steps are very mindless. Once you've like figured it out, it's just like you just repeat till you've die cut 30 some of them. Or you could just do like a normal person and just do a few. But still, I just, this, you know, the card idea was starting to form at this point. So I glued all those toppers to the ornaments, set them aside on their board to let the glue dry. While the glue was drying, I ran through Neenah Desert Storm cardstock, and I used Simon's Delicate, I think it's Delicate Pine Branches, is that what it's called? Yeah, Delicate Pine Branches embossing folder. So I've got a textured background, and I wanted to add some color to it. You could just do this on green cardstock, but you guys know I love my Desert Storm, like craft cardstock, chef's kiss. So I needed to add some color. Rather than do ink blending, because I actually did that on a previous holiday video, I pulled out a spray. So I'm using Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide Spray. Super quick, super easy. And I discovered that after I sprayed it, I have this dry baby wipe here that just dried up. And I use that usually, you know, to wipe up glues, different things. And after I would spray the oxide spray, I would just kind of pat at it with that dry baby wipe. And it helped move the color around a bit. It absorbed some of the excess, which was kind of nice because that meant these would dry faster. And that wasn't even my intent really, but it just worked. So it kind of solidified the color, you know, in the upper corner. It gave it a little bit more oomph in a sense of texture because, you know, it's moving things around a little bit. And then it's also preventing these from like really curling up with all the spray. So I just kept repeating the process, doing this over and over again in my spot box, spraying it a few times with the Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide Spray, dabbing at it with that little dry baby wipe, and then just repeat until I had all those backgrounds covered. And then I'm going to add more because it's just what I do. So of course I'm going to add more splatter. So I'm going to use Fresh Balsam Mica Stain. I've done so many videos. This is actually, though, the first time I've opened. These are the Christmas ones from Tim Holtz because there's, you know, the 2 packs of 3. And I don't even know why. Don't ask me why I do the things I do. I have been hoarding these and I don't know why. Like, I have been, okay? It just is. Even though I know they're coming back. It's not like you can never get these again. And even then I tell people, like, use the things. But I cracked open the package, cracked it open, shook it up really well, put it on my palette, and splattered the Ever Living Daylights out of all of these with this Fresh Balsam Mica Stain. So when it dries, it just gives it that shimmer, and yet it's not going to distract really from anything else because it's just that nice, pretty green color. So it kind of blends into the background. So after I did all my splattering and patted myself on the back for actually using one of the Christmas mica stains, I set those aside again to dry. Next step was sentiments. So I created a little template. I just took a scrap of black cardstock and I die cut the coordinating wafer die for this sentiment. And I'm using sentiments from the Picket Fence Studios Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree set, which is adorable. It's got a little Christmas tree and all these little mice. It's adorable. Yeah. I just used the sentiments, or a couple of the sentiments from the set. So I used the coordinating wafer die cut it from that piece. I taped it into my Misty. So I've got my little template. And then I had just die cut a bunch of scraps of black cardstock with that same wafer die. And using my template, I can then put the die cut piece into place, use my anti-static powder tool, ink up the coordinating sentiment with my clear embossing ink. And again, using my reverse tweezers because, you know, you don't have a lot of space around a die cut sentiment, and then melting with my heat tool. Now you could like stamp and coat all of these with embossing powder and then heat them back to back like all at once. I don't like doing that with little sentiments like this because it's guaranteed I'm going to lose probably 3 of them at least, or get my elbow in things. It's just easier to melt them each, set them aside, go on to the next one. So I did all the sentiments, set them all aside. While I had my Misty out, I put in my card bases, which are top folding A2 white note cards. And I took another sentiment from that same little Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree stamp set. And I am stamping that sentiment on the inside of these cards with Rustic Wilderness Distress Oxide ink. And stamping, again, all the card bases. By this point, I knew how many cards I was going to do because I had 9 of those embossed backgrounds. That's what determined it. Not even the ornaments or anything else. It was the backgrounds. It was like, I've got 9 of them. I'm making 9 cards. So once the insides were stamped, I had trimmed down these panels. They were originally meant to cover the entire card front, but because they had been embossed and sprayed and everything else, they weren't, well, it was the embossing. They weren't exactly A2 sized anymore. And I was like, I'm not going to trim little bits of these card bases off, you know, to make everything work. It's more work to do that than it would be to just trim these backgrounds. So I trimmed down all the backgrounds. Then I adhered them to the card bases using my trusty Misty as my like holder to hold everything flat to let the glue dry. So all the backgrounds are adhered. My original plan was I was just going to use silver cord and tape it to the back of each of these ornaments. Quick and simple. I had thought about it. You could still do something like that. It would work great. But I decided to be extra. And because I actually have a fair bit of silver glitter cardstock. And I've mentioned this before. I don't use silver very often. I've been making a point of it this year in my holiday series to use silver more because I know a lot of you guys love it. And I do love silver. I just don't reach for it for whatever reason. So I have a lot of silver glitter paper. It just builds up. I think it multiplies behind my back. So while things were drying, I die cut a ton of little pieces of silver glitter paper using the little hanger with the bow from the ornament shaker dies from earlier. And also because I really liked that. Because the thought of just using silver cord, I was like, it just feels empty, like it needs a bow. And I was like, I am not tying like 36 bows. I would rather die cut 36 bows. So that's what I did. So there's my thought process. So same thing. I would adhere the ornaments kind of randomly. I was just doing 3 though, 3 per card. And then I would adhere the little like glitter hanger for them. And then I would stick them under my Misty so that it would hold everything just flat and I could go on to the next one. So I'm not sitting there, you know, with my hands holding things down. So and then I would just keep repeating. Again, zoning out to a show. I'm pretty sure at this point I just had like Christmas music just blasting because hello, the new like Backstreet Boys Christmas album. Yes. Love it. Seriously. So anyway, it just kept repeating. Just kept doing it. And then when the glue was dry, I would flip the cards over and trim off the toppers so that everything is flush to the edge of the card. And then I would adhere my die cut sentiments. I used a bit of just thin foam squares and a bit of glue. And then same thing. I would stick some blocks on them just to hold the sentiment down, just to let that glue dry. Repeat, repeat, repeat until all of these card fronts were done. And this was just dumb luck because again, this just evolved into this mass production thing. I had just enough ornaments left over to put on the insides of every card. So again, just dumb luck because I wasn't counting nothing in the beginning. I was just like, let's just play with new products and see what happens. And then it really like, oh my gosh, the mess I have in here. Anyway, so I adhered an ornament to the inside of each card. It just finished it off, you know, gave it that little extra something. And always a person could stop here, but I'm not going to. Of course, I'm going to add more bling. Just to tie all the forms of silver together. I've got that silver paste and the matte silver toppers, the silver glitter hangers, and then I pulled out these Studio Katia silver foil discs because why not? And also because at this point I was like, you know, I've done pretty good. I've got a lot of texture going on in these cards in various ways, but there's not dimension. You could totally do, like, it would look amazing if you pop some of these up with like foam squares, etc. But I decided not to. I kept these cards pretty flat. They're very mailable. And yeah, I made a bunch of them, and they got like texture and shimmer and sparkle, and they were like genuinely a lot of fun. So like I'd mentioned earlier, I will have links, of course, to all the supplies, but the paper glitz I will link at the bottom just because of their liquid consistency, so they wouldn't necessarily work for what I just showed. But I will link to those paper glaze, like mousse type consistency, because those definitely work. And I need to play with them some more. I'm quite happy with them. So I will have links to all the things in the description box below the video, as well as a link to my blog post. I'll have a playlist linked at the end of this video to all the previous holiday cards I've made so far this year. Still planning on making more because I'm getting to the point where I need to start making, like, starting on next year's Christmas cards as well, because why not? I'm in the Christmas spirit. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching, thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!